Good evening, workshoppers. Here we are with episode 159, The Future of Fansites. There's been some turbulent times in the Diablo community, and just for Blizzard, the Blizzard community in general. And there's some things I wanted to go through and talk about, as I hinted at in the last episode when I was still pretty emotional, just getting hit by the news of the layoffs and such. And then last week wasn't really any better. And in order to go through and talk about just some of the challenges that are going through and affect people within the creative community, I decided to go and get JR Eldorian. He's been on the show before. Give a nice warm welcome here.
Hey. Oh man, yeah, it's been a few weeks.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just it's something that we had talked offline, a little bit about some of the stuff as everything was going through and happening, and I definitely wanted to go through and get you on the show, especially with the news from Diablo Fans and all the other types of stuff. It's been a rough couple weeks. It has been a real rough couple weeks.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting into the healing period now, though. But there's definitely been some burns. That's for dang sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. As we do, typically go through and start the show. I know you've been on, here a couple of times, but if you'd like to introduce yourself, maybe for some first-time listeners and such, who are you? What are you doing here? Why are you on my lawn?
Sure. So my name is JR Cook. I go on the internet as Eldorian. Personally, I just prefer being called JR. So if you can just call me that throughout the show, that'd be fine.
Copy that, Eldorian.
Yeah. Oh boy. I am the one of the co-founders of BlizzPro.com, which hosts this podcast. I started that in 2013, and I have been writing for Fansites, for Blizzard-related Fansites, since 2004. And I've been writing for Fansites in general, gaming fan since 1999. So I'm going on 20 years now of doing this voluntarily.
Yeah.
So there you have it. I know quite a bit about Fansites.
Just a little tiny minuscule amount, right?
Right.
Yeah. You dip your toe in for a little bit.
Yeah. Beyond that, I also do my own podcast about Hearthstone, which is also hosted over at BlizzPro. It's called Well Met, and I've been doing that for a while now. I think we're almost up to episode 200.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'll catch up one day. I promise.
Well, we record weekly. You've been doing this longer than I have.
Yeah.
So you do have that.
Yeah, I know we got lapped there a while ago. But maybe this will be the year and go back to weekly content. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I know we'll get some of the topics that you won't be able to talk to as much out of the way real quick.
Yeah, that's the other thing you should introduce me as, is I know next to nothing about Diablo.
I forgive you. I definitely forgive you in that one. But of course, some positive news that we have to go through and start the the episode off with. We've got a little bit of a shakeup. There is just recently announced the Season 17 is being delayed and Season 16 itself is being extended. And the reasoning for that is that I guess Season 16 proved to be a little bit more popular than what Blizzard was expecting. And so they went on just a couple days ago to go and say that Season 16 has been proved to be their most popular themed season yet. Not their most popular season, but their most popular one since going through and introducing it with the double treasure goblins last year. And because of that, they want to go a little bit more with Season 17. So this makes me think that maybe they had something planned for season 17, and now they feel as if it's not enough, that they want to go through and do more. So now, instead of ending what would actually just be a couple weeks from now, is being pushed all the way back until May 12th. So
they're pushing it back nearly 2 months.
Yeah, and that May 12th is just the end of season 16. So the actual start of season 17 will be a couple weeks after that, 1 or 2 weeks after that.
So what determines how a season is more popular?
I would imagine that is concurrency. Just like the number of unique players that they have going through, logging onto the servers, and how many they're able to maintain. What is like your average concurrent user levels like throughout the season? I would imagine.
And bear in mind, I'm Diablo dumb,
mm-hmm.
and I've dabbled in Diablo. I play it very casually. Does this include? Do the seasons coexist on all instances? Like, so you've got the PC.
Oh yes,
Nintendo Switch and all of that. Do they all run the same seasons at the same time?
Yes, they do. With the same start date, like within hours.
So could the Nintendo Switch release of the game be part of the reason why this could be more popular?
It potentially. The season 16 was actually like the first seasonal launch that was available on the Switch, and that was back in January. So they were included. You could go through and roll a character in season 15 when the Switch itself, or the Switch version, came out. You could just immediately go and hop in, but then they had their first actual rollover and like official start with season 16. I guess that could very well have had some effect on it. I'm sure that they probably include all of the console figures, in those concurrent numbers when they're going and looking at how many active users they have.
Right.
That definitely could be it. And it's just it's interesting because the way that they did the PTR for season 16 almost felt like an afterthought, because they only gave us a 1 week PTR with very huge wide sweeping changes, when previously they would have very minimal changes and we would get a 2-month PTR. Though this is, of course, because the development team that's working on it now is Classic Games and not Team 3, which was the team that originally had developed Diablo 3. And so it could just be that they're wanting to go through and do something a bit more significant with the season itself. They could have some more class balance changes or quality of life changes that they want to go and implement. We could maybe finally get gems as a currency instead of as an interactable item. Who knows? That would take some time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this late in Diablo 3's history, that a season would be as popular as it is compared to other ones.
Yeah, and
because of that, they would extend it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just feels, especially after the last 6 months that Diablo's had.
Yeah,
that it's still that popular. It just seems odd to me, but that's why I was wondering if it had anything to do with the Switch release.
It very well could, I imagine, because a lot of people that are going through and playing it on the Switch, this is like their first foray into ARPGs or the world of Diablo itself. So they're more or less, kind of insulated from the fallout from Immortal. Like, they have no stake in it, so they don't care. There was no damage with their relations, in terms of how that announcement was handled.
Yeah.
So
and I see Longshot talking in chat about this is a item season.
Sorry, what was that? You're breaking up a little bit there.
This is a Longshot season.
Yes. That this is the free item season. Because the current season, everyone that plays in the seasonal is getting the benefit of the Ring of Royal Grandeur, which means that you have one less item in your set. Yeah. Gotcha. So you only need 3 items for the 4-piece or 5 items for the 6-piece.
I understand now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they have been launching some PTRs, in the background, though we've not been having access to them. It seems, I believe, that there was a post from Tivolier a little while ago that was going through and talking about how they'll be doing some internal testing. And so we'll be seeing some PTRs go active that we will not have access to. And so, they're doing some calibrations for, a high-end play. Because there is one of the biggest issues that faces teams that are pushing like Greater Rift 150s now, especially after the most recent round of balance changes, has been gameplay and not actual gameplay, if that makes sense. The lag monster is one of the biggest things that's impacting people. Just the server performance, being able to keep up with all the massive amounts of calculations. Not the numbers that they're calculating, but how many numbers that they're calculating between dots, procs, area damage, and all other sorts of stuff. I believe this is now like the second or third iteration that we had go live last week. So yeah, I have no idea how many more that we're gonna get, or if we're gonna go through and see a player PTR go live at some point, which I imagine that they will, but it'll be, are they going to do another 1 week PTR, or will they do more of the traditional like 2-month PTR? And we'll kind of have the answer to that one just a couple weeks as we get, halfway through March would be about the time that we should expect the PTR, if they're going off of like the old stuff.
Yep.
And so that's cool. Diablo 2 wasn't getting anywhere near this much love this far into its life cycle as we are going into Diablo 3. So it's nice that they are still supporting it, and while they're continuing to develop Diablo 4, Diablo Immortal, and apparently a couple other titles.
Yeah, it's still surprises me that they have multiple projects, plural, and that we only know of one of them so far.
Well, we kind of know of 2, but they just haven't announced the other one.
Oh, which 2 are you talking about?
Immortal.
I can argue that there's more than that.
Well, Immortal and Diablo 4.
Right. Okay, that's the ones I thought you meant.
Yeah.
I didn't know if the Netflix TV show ever ended up becoming a thing or not.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything from that, and I actually talked about that a couple episodes ago. Just from my experience in like the movie industry, is that that all kind of came from the the person that was being tapped to write the script for this proposed episode, or this proposed series, had just leaked online that, I'm in final talks with Blizzard in order to go through and write a Diablo series for Netflix. Because like there's no, like, besides Star Wars and stuff like that, there's really no big NDAs in terms of like the theater industry. They want you talking about it to press outlets, because at that point it's free publicity, it's free media exposure for their show to get out there and to start like generating hype for it. Whereas of course then Blizzard is the exact opposite. No, we don't talk about anything. And he, as soon as it was pointed out, like within hours his tweets were deleted. So
right. And we still got, like you said, it was still multiple projects. I don't know if that ever meant that it was developer game projects or not.
I want to say it is, just because...
Yeah, I do want to say it is too.
Yeah, it just... Blizzard doesn't really have, like, an animation wing or anything like that. Right. They of course they do, but a lot of, like, the cinematic Overwatch stuff is actually outsourced out of company.
But so is Diablo Immortal.
Yeah. I mean, Diablo Immortal is, to a degree.
To a degree. They do have some in-house people working on that, obviously. But I guess probably Heroes of the Storm not getting any more love was probably the best thing to happen to Diablo, because now I no longer have to hear about, well, maybe one of those projects is creating another Diablo character in Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah.
And those people I wanted to slap, because, come on.
Yep, they're just...
I would imagine Diablo 2 remaster, Diablo Remaster is probably one of those as well.
Yeah, I do have to say that, you know, there was a lot of controversy within the community about whether a Diablo 2 or Diablo 1 remaster would happen because of an interview that Riker did with David Brevik, one of the original designers of the, you know, Diablo and Diablo 2 a couple years ago, where he stated that, you know, he believes that the original source code for the game is lost. And so if Blizzard wanted to do it, they'd have to redevelop it from scratch, and that would be a massive undertaking. But then with Warcraft 3 Reforged, they're redeveloping the game from scratch, entirely new engine. So it's like, well, if they did it for one, and that is financially successful, they'll probably do it for another. And so there's a pretty good chance that we might get, the Diablo 2 remaster.
Yep.
And I actually did an interview with the one of the producers on Classic Games about Warcraft 3 Reforged.
Right, you did that over at BlizzCon for us.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because before and after the interview, we exclusively talked about Diablo once he found out that I was a Diablo guy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because he was a really, really big fan of D2 and D3, and so we were talking about like some of our favorite memories and such, you know, of the games. And they actually had a lot of they had a couple of developers and producers that were originally on Team 3 that had moved over to Classic Games, you know, over the last couple of years. And so they had some, you know, some of the people that were responsible for helping make the original Diablo 3 on the team, and that, I guess, built a little bit of you know, game, you know, IP pride, I guess it would be.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that really feels like this. And I hate to say it because of the Diablo Immortal fallout, but I would imagine that they're also making some kind of mobile game that is Diablo related in-house.
In addition to Immortal?
Yeah. I would imagine, like, it doesn't have to be like a Diablo, like, straight up game that would compete with Diablo Immortal. Yeah. I'm just saying it would be like, think of it like Hearthstone is to Warcraft.
Okay.
So it could be something completely different using the Diablo world.
Yeah. Or even just, you know, maybe an interface app or something like that. Probably not so much for Diablo 3, but for whatever other projects that they're working on.
Yeah.
Kind of like the WoW app.
It could be. I mean, I would imagine that they have mobile games in the works for all of their IPs at this point. And I would imagine that there are multiple games at this point. Just for the fact of the nature of mobile games. Like, Blizzard has recently talked about ramping up the amount of games that they put out, and significantly. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that, in my opinion, would be from these mobile games that they're wanting to start doing.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, because I know that we're a PC crowd, and your listeners are a PC crowd, and everybody in the, you know, everybody that's been playing Diablo is a PC crowd. But we're not going to be the core gamers in 5 years. We're, I mean, we will be to a certain degree, but the core gamers that are growing up right now are mobile gamers. And this is why so many people are starting to focus on mobile now.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is.
It's unfortunate, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
It's, you know, kind of like the shift in the industry, though. It's also one of those ones, like, PC gaming is definitely never going to go away. Do you remember, you know, going through the late 90s, early 2000s, the death of PC gaming was like the title in every single gaming magazine, and yet here we are.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do not think that PC gaming right now is as strong as it was back then either. I mean, people are playing. I would say console gamers are still more popular than PC.
Yeah, I'm just going through and thinking about, I know the gaming industry as a whole. I think it was this past year, mobile gaming made up 51% of the income.
Yep, and mobile gaming is even beyond that
at this point. Yeah, and so that we're definitely entering a change. There's probably no going back from here. Is much to the dismay of everyone that goes through and shares the memes. Yes, we do all have phones, and so it's just a matter of time before you actually pick it up and play on it or not.
Yeah, and it's just it's a different culture. It's a different time when you grew up. It's for a lot of us, it's going to be things that we're not used to, and unfortunately, that happens when you get older.
Yeah, yeah. You newfangled kids in your cartridge games. I remember going through and typing in my game code in the back of a magazine.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or I need to access this game back in the old DRM before DRM game or days when I had to make sure that I own this copy. I better have that instruction manual ready because on page 10, paragraph 3, word 5 was the word that I need to type in to start my game.
What was the maximum yield on the Proton Torpedo in Wing Commander 2? Find it on page 79. Yeah, I 100% feel you on that one. Oh, man.
Yeah, you remember those days.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was one of those. It was just like, the old school WoW authenticators where you had to actually enter it in every time that you logged into the game.
Right.
Yeah, yep. That was that. Is every time that you want to open the game, you had to flip open the manual, go to whatever page that it asked for, and then, just find like the little lore bit or, number or whatever it was that it was asking.
Yeah. Yep. With all that said, I still, you guys heard me talk about Diablo Immortal in the past.
Yeah.
My thoughts on them just might be the right thing for them to do, but not the right place for them to announce. So
yeah.
I'm not going to reiterate it, all of that.
Yep. I think the community as a whole has, kind of heard enough that we pretty much have said everything that there is to say about Immortal until we actually get more information on it. Until they start releasing new
Agreed.
info, then it's everything.
And
everyone's
Blizzard is being very quiet about it now too, because they know.
Oh yeah, they're learning their lesson.
They know they messed up.
Yeah. And then also, of course, kind of speaking of mess ups and kind of PR blunders, we've got the fallout, from the last episode 2 weeks ago, back on February 12th when they announced the layoffs of close to 800 employees at Activision Blizzard across all of their major studios. And
yeah, that came out of nowhere, in my opinion. We knew about it heading up to the date. We knew about it on the Friday before it happened. And what sucks is, so did all of the employees.
Yeah, they had to go. That was a rough weekend. That wasn't even that you had to wait till Monday. You actually had to go back to work a full day, and then still tomorrow is when you find out whether you got axed or not.
Yep. And can I cuss on the show?
Go for it.
It was so goddamn shitty for Blizzard to do, for not Blizzard, but Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
And the way that they handled that, where they had their quarterly earnings and their CEO, who I'm not even going to mention his name because he doesn't even deserve to be recognized at this point.
You can see the eyes.
Yeah. He goes, this was our biggest revenue ever. A quarter ever. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough.
Oh no.
So we're gonna lay off 8% of the company. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then,
what is enough at that point?
Yeah,
what is enough?
And the walk back on it is that they expect like a 13% revenue drop, going into the next year, which I believe totaled to around like $1 billion. But when you're talking about like you're letting go of employees because you're expecting your revenue to decline by 13%, but what about, are you still going to be making profit off of that revenue figures? Like if you're still making money, then what exactly is the loss? And then this is something that I unfortunately get into, and I'm not going to talk about politics on the show, but just a lot of people that don't really understand how like economics and finances and taxes and all that stuff work. Like how much were they paying those employees? Because this was customer service. This was like the GMs, publication, community management, and such. They're not these jobs aren't making six figures. Even if they were, say that you totaled them, all of them were making six figures. That's only $700,000 at the end of the year when you're expecting your revenue to drop by $1 billion. Where is that actually going to do anything to your bottom line? Say if it was like just like 1%, and you're losing $100 million. Where is 700,000 going to mean in any of that? Like it's like one of those ones where it seems so out of touch and completely unnecessary, especially when you just spent you just promised the new CFO $15 million in compensation as a signing bonus for coming onto the company. Not even coming onto the company. He already worked there. He was the CCO, the chief corporate officer. He just moved over to being the CFO, and they gave him $4 million in cash and $11 million in stocks payable out over 4 years.
Yeah. Now the thing about the stocks though is that doesn't come out of the same budget that you pay your employees.
Yeah, it's money. It's basically it's like non-tangible money because they have to. They can't turn that directly into cash, and they can't build a game off of stock, and they can't pay their employees off of stock.
But still a ridiculous amount.
I mean,
all things considering,
he still has $4 million in cash that he's going through and making. Which again, if we're going off of like a very high estimate, you take $4 million over the 4 years, you take out the $700,000 that your employees were potentially making, $800,000 dollars that your employees were making if they're all making $100,000 a year, and he still has what was it? I can do math. $800,000, almost $1 million in his pocket in cash at the end of the 4 years, anyways.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't get it. And I know you said you weren't going to talk about politics, and this doesn't really get into politics, but also companies just had a huge tax cut this year. You went from 35% to 17% taxes.
Yeah.
Something like that. And so, I mean, you would think that money would be spent on employees and keeping your workforce and doing that, but instead, I feel like they're pocketing the money for themselves. That's what it comes across as.
Oh yeah.
Now on the flip side of all of this, unless you were going to say some more there.
No, go ahead.
So on the flip side of all of this, though, is there is the problem that happens where your business and your company becomes more inefficient, and you do need to reorganize when that happens. And that has nothing to do with making money. That has more to do with we need to make our it does have to do with making money, but it really comes down to we need to be more efficient with our company.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we are spending money in the right places and the right resources to be the most efficient that we can be. On the flip side of all of this, I do believe that is part of what happened here.
Oh yeah. And that's one of those ones where I know, like, a lot of times Blizzard, it's like it hurts so much because Blizzard is normally like the exception within the video game company. A lot of other developers, after they ship one of these like AAA titles, there will be some layoffs afterwards. You know, they'll let go as they trim development staff as they now begin working on the next big thing, but they don't need a lot of these associate level positions anymore. You know, and so there's actually a lot of movement within the video game industry itself, working from one developer to the next while you're getting your feet wet. Once you have a little bit more experience, you know, then you can begin to build tenure at a company. But Blizzard is one of those ones where it's an exception because, like, we just saw with Heroes of the Storm, they you know, when they kind of shuttered the Heroes of the Storm esports and are rolling back the production on it, they didn't let go of the developers, they shifted them to other titles. In like almost any other studio, those developers would have lost their jobs. Like, okay, you know, you can apply for some of these other positions, but you're gone now. You know, and so it's just some of those things that it kind of took me by surprise that they wouldn't also try to do that again. But, you know, like you're saying, I think it was in a Forbes or a New York Times article that I read that was covering it. They had talked about how, like, a while ago, Blizzard had started like this new prerogative for their community team where they had it split, like they had a global team and then they had the regional teams, and that there was a huge amounts of overlap and that it was extremely inefficient, and that this is one of the things that got shuttered in this particular layoff and the restructuring was that we're getting rid of that experiment and just going back to one community.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, the community team, early on when they started doing this, I know a lot of people did not like the idea, and because it was going to make them more inefficient. But I think the idea behind it was that Blizzard was going to grow into this global thing and that they needed more people to handle different regions. And because it used to be like, if you're a fan site, you dealt with the community managers for the game, and those community managers handled everybody for the most part. Usually you had some community managers over in Europe, you had some community managers over in Asia, but there's usually like one or two people, and the community managers in Irvine would work with them, and then that was basically your global team. Then they kept that, but then they introduced the idea of global and the global publishing team, and I'm not 100% sure what they did, to be honest. I know a lot of community managers that went over to that team, and then I never really heard from them again. So I'm sure that they were, you know, probably working more behind the scenes, working with communication between people, probably lessening the work, you know, the amount of work that had to be done. And if anybody from Blizzard's listening to this and I'm completely incorrect, please let me know. Because this is just how I, from the outside looking in without seeing what is actually being done, that's what I perceived it as. And then you had, but beyond that, then you also had public relations and PR, which actually worked differently than community, in the fact that they worked more with larger publications, and they were like the voice of controlling the message, basically. And they worked more with like the big sites like you would see with like Polygon or Forbes or you know, whoever the big guns out there were. That's primarily who they worked with, whereas community managers worked more with people with fan sites, people like us that do podcasts,
the influencers.
The influencers,
the term that everybody hates.
They decided to name that about 5 or 6 years ago, and I hate the name.
And it's not just them. I hear about it on like YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that, where it's not content creators, it's influencers.
Yeah, I always hated when they changed that.
Yeah. And I do want to make a quick amendment. Watson is pointing out that I'm incredibly bad at math, and that it's actually $80 million, not $800,000. So that makes a bit more sense.
I didn't feel like doing math, so I wasn't going to check you.
Yeah, I'm incredibly bad. That is a very, very, very big error on my part.
Yeah,
so,
and you forgot to carry the 1.
Forgot to carry the 1 and then the 2 and such. So I guess that does...
And like the 5 zeros after it.
Yeah, just a couple. So that does make, I guess, a bit more sense.
Yeah. But yeah, so, what sucks though about that is nearly everybody that I've worked with at Blizzard for the last 10, 12 years doesn't work at Blizzard anymore now. Keep in mind, like, over the years, there's less and less people, because once they changed to that global publishing team, I never heard from them again. And then they created like this North America influencer person, which was like a community manager for certain people or something. And it's almost like the notes of who did what never like got flipped over, and they just reached out to YouTubers and stuff like that, which I'm not.
Yeah.
But it was only for certain teams. Hearthstone was one of the ones that did that. And the entire, like, for Hearthstone, this affected us huge, because everybody that I worked with in Hearthstone got fired that day. So all of my contacts with Hearthstone are gone at this point.
That was something
that included like the fireside gatherings.
Yeah.
Contacts that included people that I've worked with since the beginning of Hearthstone. And I don't know anybody. Like, I know that there's a CM there somewhere. I just need to reach out, and it's someone I've never talked to. So I know that they have at least one. I feel like it affected Diablo a lot less, if at all.
To a certain extent. There was a lot that was being done, by Lashes and Tivolier. Though I guess like the public face of the community management had largely kind of like gone silent, but there was still, that was a lot that was done like in the background of communicating, with content creators, influencers, if you will, in such, in order to go through and coordinate stuff. And so now we're basically, to my knowledge, we're down to only like two CMs, and one of those is previously was on the Latin American team. It mostly still handles that type of stuff. And so it kind of is just for us, it's Nevelistis,
right?
At least that I know of.
And she is the only community manager I know of now that I've ever worked with at Blizzard. And I've worked with tons of them in all the games. She's the only one left that I know personally.
Yeah. That was
that's fun.
Yeah, that was one of those ones that really hit hard, because like Tivolier Blake, I had known him from when we did work on another fan site,
right,
in Gamers, before he went and got the job at Blizzard. And so that's a friendship that was for a very long time. And then when you find out that like one of your good friends just lost their job, it's like heart-wrenching,
right? And especially sucks for a lot of these people, because this was a job that most people, like, it was their dream job. And I will be honest, like, I've attempted to try to work at Blizzard before, and then I got to see how much they get paid, and I decided, nope, not for me. So it's one of those things, like, it's a job of passion. Like, Blizzard pays less because they know that they're gonna get a ton of people that want to work there because it's their dream job. And those people are willing to put in the work and get paid less because it's something they strongly believe in.
Yeah, and many of those people are working there for a very long time, with super long periods of crunch and all the overwork and stuff like that.
Right.
And they still believe. They still believe in the company, even after getting laid off, that they still, how many, I was going to say, like, that was my dream job, was probably the most common thing that I saw from those affected by the layoffs, on social media following, kind of like the aftermath of all of it. And it's just,
one of the Hearthstone guys that I worked with, he I think he was on his 16th or 17th year there at Blizzard. He was one of the ones let go.
Oof.
He has never worked for anybody else, basically.
Yeah. And then, kind of like following that, last week you had ArenaNet went through and laid off like about 150 people, and then it's just I don't know. Seems like it might be a rough time in the gaming industry for a lot of video game developers.
Well, we're past the end of the year. Last year, and all the financials are done. It's tax season at this point, and it's time. You're at the beginning of the year. It's time to reevaluate your business and see where you want to go for next year.
Yeah.
And so this is the time of year that a lot of this happens. My company I work for just went through it recently as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even in the gaming industry.
Yeah. And also going through and talking about it. And one of the things that while emotions were like still high on the last episode, I didn't want to talk about it like too much, but it is one of those things that now kind of thinking about it and letting it simmer and such. I'm sure I am a self-described fanboy, but I still at least continue to maintain faith in Blizzard themselves, because like all these layoffs and such definitely seemed that was more of a push from Activision Blizzard and less of something from Blizzard themselves. Not fully giving the executives at Blizzard the full kind of like get out of jail free card, because I feel like a lot of these maybe redundancies and inefficiencies in the structure were caused internally at Blizzard, and Activision had to kind of come in and be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, how much money are you just hemorrhaging because you don't know how to run things?
And does that fall on Mike Morhaim's shoulders?
I mean, with the time frame, it would, because
so
that's I guess one of those ones.
Here's a difficult thing. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because that's like one of those ones where it's like you have a CEO that's universally loved by all, one of the top rated CEOs of any multi-billion-dollar corporation and such, but if you're leading with your heart, you probably are going to end up in instances like this, specifically where you don't want to go and fire people or let them go. Because they did. But, sorry, go ahead.
But keep in mind, Blizzard did layoffs 6 years ago.
Yeah, and they laid off
pretty big ones.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up, because they laid off the 600 employees. But what the interesting thing in that instance was?
They were mostly QA and stuff like that.
And Mike Morhaim personally was the one that talked with almost all 600 of those employees when they were let go.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, because that is the type of CEO that he was.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting thing, because I have a theory that I'm not 100% sure is correct, but I feel like it's pretty close. And I feel like Mike Morhaim loved community. Mm-hmm. He loved BlizzCon. He loved esports. He loved people gathering around. I think the moment that clicked for him was when World of Warcraft was so popular on release night, when they went and did signings at local fries, and people were wrapped around the building to show up for that, to get their stuff signed for World of Warcraft. And I think that was the moment things kind of clicked for Morhaim and for Blizzard, that there's something big going on here, and we need to embrace community. And we need to, and then they're seeing how popular esports was doing in Korea, and pushing it over here. And I think Morhaim basically had the idea of, what, this is who we are, this is what we're going to embrace as a company. And even though it's not making money for us, in this instance, it's making money for us in other ways that probably isn't as easy to track.
It was an acceptable loss in his eyes.
Right. So at that point, I believe community and esports was basically a cost center. Mm-hmm. But he was okay with that because he understood how all of that together made something that was different than what other gaming studios had.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Activision does not see it the same way.
Oh, no.
And no.
Oh, no.
Activision does not see that the same way. And Mike Morhaime was the shield against Activision. And Blizzard was making bags of money. And because of that, Activision's like, you know what? You guys go do your thing. Even though we don't like some of the stuff that you're doing, there's nothing we can do because Morhaime has got this right now, right?
Yeah.
I think there was a breaking point, and it happened with Titan.
Yeah.
And Titan failed miserably. And they put a lot of money into Titan, and it broke things financially, and it broke things mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
Look at how many people have left Blizzard because of Titan. And I believe very strongly people like Rob Pardo, Chris Metzen, and even Mike Morhaime have left Blizzard because of that, because of the mental, emotional thing that happened there. Because this all started happening after that. Overwatch came out of that and was very successful.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was as successful as what they envisioned Titan to be.
Or what they needed it to be.
Or what they needed it to be, exactly. And at that point, the executives at Blizzard and Activision started getting a lot more say in how the company is going to be run, because I believe at that point, Morhaime has probably lost. That the shields have been torn down.
Yeah.
At that point, the shield has been torn down, and I think as his last hurrah, knowing that they're gonna cut esports and community, he probably was like, I can't run this anymore. I'm out.
Yeah.
And that's
it.
That's when Activision Blizzard showed that they no longer care as much about community. Now, I want to be clear that the people that work in community and all of that, and the developers, 100%, I'm still think that they believe strongly around community. I believe senior leadership and executives don't care. And I think that's the shift that's happened.
Yeah, and that, of course, no matter how passionate it is you are, in your particular role, if you're not being given, the budget or the tools necessary to, perform at a certain level, you're not going to be able to.
Right.
And
yep.
Yeah,
and that's my theory. That's my theory of everything that happened. Keep in mind, I know no information other than just
the outside
being a Blizzard fan and working with a lot of these people for 10 plus years.
Yeah. And then, of course, on the other side of that, we have had just some more fallout, after that, because especially this is a tough time. If you're a Heroes of the Storm fan, this is an extremely tough time, because you had the esports for your game shuttered, you had development scaled back, and then your community managers are gone. And we actually, Heroes of the Storm shared a lot of the same community managers as Diablo did, because they're all lumped into the same team. And of course, for the people on the Diablo side, there was kind of the kerfluffle with the Immortal announcement. People have already been complaining for the longest time that Diablo just wasn't getting the love that it should, and then when you don't announce Diablo 4 in a game that just didn't really co-align with what the fans' expectations were, and then you have people that are just now looking for any excuse that they can to hate Blizzard. You go and you have these massive layoffs, and that just sours that aspect of the community even more. But then that now has beginning to have like larger implications and such. Last week, Diablo Fans announced that they are shutting down and going into archive mode.
Right.
And they cited just the uncertainty of future development coming from Blizzard, and just the traffic going through and not meeting expectations, drying up over the last couple of years. And then this was something.
But that's corporate BS too, though.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's 100%. That's why I kind of like lumped them together. That it's all like kind of like corporate bullshit, because it is Diablo Fans isn't a fan site. It hasn't been a fan site because they are owned by Curse Media, and so they're.
Curse Media has been sold how many times now at this point?
Quite a few, because Curse sold them to Twitch, and then now Twitch sold them to Fandom.
Right.
This Curse Media is an actual separate entity from Curse directly, and so it's just a whole bunch of like kind of passing hot potato around and such. But it is one of those ones where it's just like I think it's I say this all the time in the Slack channel. The hits keep on coming.
Yeah,
and
this is. So this one's a little bit different, in my opinion, the Diablo Fans thing, and I think it is that comes down to, some corporate BS and selling, entities and the weirdness of what happens when you do that, especially in media. But at the same time, like this entire like Blizzard layoff, like even before the Blizzard layoffs, when you start talking about the debacle that they had with BlizzCon. And everything in the last 5 months at Blizzard, 6 months at Blizzard, is gonna have a ripple effect with community as a whole, and part of that's gonna be there's gonna be fan sites that decide that are owned by companies, and they're like, well, Blizzard's not doing as successful, and because of that. We're not making as much money anymore, and we need to focus our attention and resources at other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sad part of having fan sites that are owned by corporations.
So they're not fan sites, they're businesses.
Right, exactly. Unfortunately, they tend to be the big ones, though, because if you become big, you get bought out by these corporations because you're like, oh, I can, sell out right now and make a decent amount of cash for something that I've been basically doing free for the last X amount of time.
Yeah. And then also a lot of that is just, because I've seen a lot of people when Diablo Fans that announced that it was going and closing, I saw a lot of people going through and being like, well, how much could it cost to run a website? I'll buy them. Like, no. not at the prices that they have for hosting that entire database.
Right. So that's huge in itself. I can't even think of what the monthly cost would be, but I can guarantee that it's more than you would be willing to fork over on a monthly basis to keep up, and I guarantee it's not going to pay you back for that amount of time that you're putting into it. So usually when corporations have this, they have a whole lot of things that they're putting the resources into, and they add up. So they'll have some that are more popular than others, but they're able to run some of these less popular ones because they're still making some money for them. But it's really being paid by the more popular ones at that point. And it's when the less popular ones, fizzle out or don't make enough, then you're like, well, we just need to cut our losses right here and focus on other things.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that, at least, for me, full disclosure, I am a paid content writer for Curse Media with Diablo Fans and such. That was just kind of it just broke my heart because like we're right on the cusp, like Diablo 4 not the release of the game, but at least the announcement, and then the picking up of the news cycle alongside where, inevitably, once Immortal launches, it's going to be popular. Maybe not with like the people listening to this podcast. Maybe it will be. We won't know until it comes out. But that is going to have a massive source of people that are going to be interested in wanting to go through and know more about that. And, whatever these other projects could be, maybe they resurrected that, Diablo, Dark Souls, Project Hades, and they're just going to go through and take that as a spin-off game for console or something like that. We have no idea, what they're working on. And if it does come to fruition, like that Netflix animated series, like we're gonna have more Diablo related content within the next couple of years than we've ever had in the history of the franchise, with just like third-party licensing, the animated series and all this other types of stuff. And then, like, at the moment, the community is just collapsing because we haven't had anything for so long in order to keep up with, like, these hosting costs and stuff like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I can't even fathom like how much like it costs them, because I know our hosting costs about $1,000 a year, and we don't make enough through the year. We used to, but we don't anymore. Make enough to pay that. Luckily, for the last several years, we've had enough in the coffers that we're not spending a lot of money beyond hosting at this point. Where we had some surplus for a couple of years because we were doing really well, and advertisements and stuff were doing fine, and we were making a little bit of extra, but we were able to put that away for a rainy day, and the rainy day is basically coming at this point.
Yeah.
So but that's a real reality of it, money wise. Like, it is hard to be a fan site right now, and probably forever at this point, because the whole platform has changed completely. So fan sites probably started dying after I even made BlizzPro.
Yeah.
But it's what I knew and what I loved.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, like when you had launched that, yeah, a lot of the StarCraft like fan sites and such that I had used to go to were kind of like all been eaten by Team Liquid.
Right.
And it was beginning to happen on the Diablo side of things as well.
Right. And it's mostly because two things happened. Or three things, I guess. Number one being social media. And social media changed the game completely. Early days of social media probably wasn't as big of a deal, but as things like Reddit started getting more popular, people that would create content found easier ways of being heard without having to go through something, or being able to do the stuff themselves. So I can go on Reddit, I can make a really good post and get a lot of likes and feel good about myself. I can go on Twitter, make up some really good memes and get a bunch of likes and feel good about myself. Video, people consume video a lot because of mobile devices at this point. People won't sit there and read stuff on their phone as much, or on their laptops as much. They'll just plug in some headphones and watch a video of whoever, or sit at their TV and watch a video of whoever. And it's more entertaining to them, especially when you get some of these assholes out there that like to make crazy drama and stuff like that, and are edgelords, and that's really popular. And unfortunately, that's not the way that I run business. But unfortunately, that's where the money's at. And then you've got Twitch on the other side, where you've got streamers streaming these games, and especially in the gaming side of things. And a lot of people see them as like the de facto expert of game X or whatever they're playing.
Yep. Whether they are or not.
Whether they are or not.
Yeah.
So that really hurts fan sites a lot. and that's okay. Like, stuff's gonna change. People are gonna, consume media differently. That's all part of the system. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with games in general. Like, we're getting old. People played games. We played games differently than kids are playing games today. And the shift's gonna be coming to games too, boys and girls.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just this. It's everything. And you just gotta be willing to change yourself as well, and redesign yourself. Unfortunately, that means that fan sites are not a profitable thing unless you're extremely lucky.
Can we blame millennials for the death of video game fan sites?
Sure.
Okay.
Even though I'm a grandpa millennial, we'll blame millennials.
I mean, like, technically, I'm a millennial as well, so it's
really the next generation after millennials that's killing. But we can blame millennials.
It just seems that that's the popular thing to do nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
My mom thinks all millennials are still in high school anyway, so we'll just blame them.
Yeah. No, it's definitely one of those ones where it's like you just kind of you have to adapt, and that's something you just see in like traditional print media now, that like the New York Times and stuff like that. The majority of their publication is online and not actually in the newspaper. And even then, you go to the webpage, and I can either watch this 1 minute video that's going to sum up the article, or I can spend half an hour going through and reading like these 10 pages.
Right.
So it's everything. Yep. Everything has to be bite-sized sound clips, and no one wants to read a wall of text.
Yep. And videos are the same way. Like, you don't want to make a super long video because people aren't gonna watch it. Or they'll watch bits of it or here and there. It's tough.
That's always been a conversation that Steven and I would have for like the longest time about like what is the right length of the show, and we just decided that we will lose audience being a 2-hour podcast, but we were okay with it. Because
I think podcasts are a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Like because the nice thing about podcasts is you don't have to watch anything. You don't have to do anything with your eyes. I know that you're releasing this on Twitch, you're releasing it on YouTube, but I'm sure that the majority of the people that are consuming
it doesn't even compare.
Are audio only.
I mean, well, you've seen the figures. You see the figures actually more than I do. And it has never been close.
Right.
It has never been close. Like, I think I try to remember a time that like the YouTube and like the Twitch views were even 10% of the total audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing about podcasts, in my opinion, is since you don't have to use your eyes, I can put on headphones. I can listen to you while I'm working, while I'm working out, while I'm driving in my car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can multitask and listen to a show. And the other thing about that is by having it be longer as well with that format, I feel like the thing I love about doing a podcast is I think it makes your fans or people that consume your content more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like they feel like they're a part of your life, and you're talking, and I'm talking to you, not you, but the listener. And like I get a lot of comments from people about asking me about X, Y, or Z, and I'm just like, wow, how do you know that about me? And it's like, oh, well, you talked about it on the show that one time. And I'm like, oh.
I did? Like, oh.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. Long shot looking at you.
Right.
Yeah.
Like long shot, yeah, telling me before the show that, I need to do the Muppet RPG thing again that I did like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
That I had completely forgotten about, right?
That you wanted to forget about.
Or that I wanted to forget about. So it's just a different form of media, and it's actually one of the reasons why I really love doing a podcast right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I completely got off topic on talking about fan sites.
I love it. Keep it coming. That's fine. That's one of those ones that definitely is like it's a weird thing. I don't know if you experience this as well, but there'll be certain times in the week when I'm going through and I'm having to like, you know, plan out, well, when are we going to the grocery store? When am I going to have time to go through in this? I really need to, you know, sit down and like try and, you know, working with, you know, Dread Scythe for going and doing these overlays and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like, oh man, I've got the podcast coming up tomorrow. That means I can't do this. I can't do that. You know, and so it's kind of like that little bit of like trepidation or anxiety going into it, where it's like, but then as soon as I sit down and I open up OBS, like that all goes away, and I'm like,
yep.
Why was I ever questioning not doing this?
I am so glad you said that, because that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
And I always question on, am I actually dedicated to doing this work?
Mm-hmm.
But I always feel, because I always like, I'm like, man, I've got too much stuff going on. I don't have time to do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but then I'll force myself to do it. And then at the end of the show, I'm just like, why did I feel bad about like this is like the awesome time of my week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 110%. I definitely feel you on that. And I also, I'm glad that I'm not the only one, but it is one of those ones where it's just, you know, it's like, it is, you know, I enjoy it. You know, I really enjoy it. You know, it's, you know, maybe this will be the year I finally stop saying it. I actually will set up a Patreon or something like that. But I do this, you know, more or less to do it. And, you know,
right.
And so
this goes back to what we're talking about with Fansites. Mm-hmm. So.
It's the passion.
You know how much money I've made over the years, you know, writing for Fansites before I owned BlizzPro? I've spent more money than what I got paid. Give you a hint.
Yeah.
Because usually I'll get invited somewhere and I'll pay the trip out of my own pocket.
Yeah. Or like even just like going through and like, you know,
and I don't get paid in a salary. Or you had it lucky because you're getting paid through Diablo Fans at least.
Yeah, but I could definitely tell you it was like a per
wasn't much.
Yeah, it was a per article flat rate, and it definitely did not even come out to minimum wage. You know, for the time invested, like going through and researching.
Right, but it was something. But
yeah,
it was something.
Yeah, it definitely was something.
You know, and here I am owning BlizzPro. I haven't paid you a damn penny, so.
It's okay. You sometimes you pay me in alcohol at BlizzCon, and that's all it's worth.
Oh yeah, I do that.
That's all I ask.
I do some work where we get some sponsorships, and I'm able to get you guys some stuff too.
Oh yeah,
I've done that.
Yeah, the Lenovo laptop that I do a lot of the editing on and such.
Yep, I was able to get you that.
Yeah, because my computer has been having some weird problems with Movie Maker, and it's been desyncing audio. That's actually one of the reasons why the last two podcasts were so late in getting posted was I could not get the audio to resync.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, even going through, taking it out, putting it into Audacity, and then re-putting the MP3 back in. I was just having problems, and so that was one of the Humble bundles from like 2 years ago. Had like an older version of what was it, Sony Vegas, and loaded that up on the laptop, and same video file taken from Twitch, no problems whatsoever. And so then I had the same exact problem on the last episode on my desktop. But again, my desktop is 2 weeks older than Diablo 3. So it is definitely beginning to become potato, and is probably time for a replacement at some point.
Yeah. But this all goes back to something though with Fansites is we do this out of passion, and that's the difference I think between something with a Diablo Fans that is corporate controlled and something like us, where we're doing this voluntarily. And I wanted to talk about the ripple effect because I wrote about this, because I wrote an article about the future of BlizzPro. And I know, Whitney, you've seen this a lot on the BlizzPro channel, where our Slack channel where all the contributors kind of hang out at. You'll see the cycle where after BlizzCon and going up to BlizzCon, Everybody is super excited, super engaged. We're doing a lot of articles. Everybody's excited to contribute and all of that. And that usually continues on for maybe 4 or 5 months. Usually gets us to the spring, maybe even to the summer sometimes. And then summer hits. Everybody just wants to go outside and have fun, going on vacations. It's not a huge priority to do things at BlizzPro. And this is just the way it works because we are volunteer based. We don't have anything set in stone because that's not how I work. I want people, when they want to write something, it's because they have passion behind it. I don't want them to write something because they feel they have to.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that I have always operated, I feel like. Maybe there are times in the past where I've been a little bit different, but usually that's how I operate. I don't know if you'll agree with that or not. But this year, and then the cycle, it goes into BlizzCon. Everybody gets excited. That's the cycle.
What is it going to talk about?
That's the cycle. This year we did not have that cycle. We ran into an issue where everybody was burned out. Summer, everybody's on vacation. You don't see a lot of traffic on our site. It shows we're not making nearly in the amount of advertisement dollars that we were before, which leads to a problem we're going to have in the future where we will eventually be having to pay hosting out of pocket at some point or reduce our hosting.
Yeah.
One or the other. And part of that is because of how Blizzard handled BlizzCon this year. And it turned a lot of our contributors off. And the passion has definitely not been there. It hasn't been there so much that I went and created another site not related to Blizzard stuff in hopes of sparking something.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has. I thought it would for me, and it hasn't yet. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there.
I mean, that's one of those ones where it's kind of hard to ignite like that type of passion, to want to go through and take time out of your day to do something that you're not going to make any money on. And it's just I'm trying to put it into words. Like you can't like force it. You can't artificially create it. It's something that just has to happen. Something that is external, that you care enough about to want to go and do that thing. And
passion is also very like snowball-y as well. Because if you get 1 or 2 people in our channel that are working off of each other on something, it grows. Because more people start getting involved as well. You've got a nice working machine going on. And usually that's around the time that BlizzCon happens that you see that. It's just like the snowball, in this case of BlizzCon, just hit a brick wall at the end. And that was it. So I'm trying to find ways to spark that passion. And, but it's hard to do when I don't have it myself. Because I'm just like, I just don't have the time for this right now. I don't know what Blizzard's doing. Why, I don't feel good about Blizzard right now.
Yeah.
And then the layoffs happened. And not only, like, that wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but it's people that I've worked with at Blizzard for 10 years were the ones most affected. And it was community were the ones that were most affected. It was esports was the ones that were most affected. And this is everything that I've worked with. So you've got this ripple effect now of we're already hurting from BlizzCon. Now this happened. You've taken away like all of my contacts at this point, where I'm going to have to re-network with all of these people to try to get us back on, some kind of map. And is it worth it?
And one of those things that was like most telling to me is like when one of the site admins for Wowhead is tweeting, "I have no idea who my contact is. I have no one left in order to go through and contact at Blizzard." Like,
right.
I mean, that's just
so. Yeah, and so you get that, and it's like, well, shoot, you any little amount of passion that I just had, you just squeezed completely out of me. And that's why I wrote the future of BlizzPro.
Mm-hmm.
And just put it out there, BlizzPro's not going away anytime soon. We're not shutting down anytime soon. The reason why I wrote that was to show the ripple effect of what the community could do, and why you probably see on BlizzPro that we're not posting as often. And it really comes down to when you see us putting a lot of work out there and a lot of articles, it's because we're feeling good about things, and there's stuff for us to be excited about. There's stuff for us to want to talk to the community about, and put stuff out there for the community. And it's tough that it's, that it doesn't seem like I know for a fact Activision Blizzard just doesn't care. There's people at Blizzard that care, and I there's still a few that I work with, but it's not the same. And for us to get that passion back, we're gonna have to regain that trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying like us going out and networking with Blizzard to regain the trust. I'm talking about Activision Blizzard showing us that we can trust them.
Yeah, and that we won't run into the same situation 3 years from now when they don't have any tentpole releases and they have to cut corners again.
Right.
Because it's like, at least like on like the one side, they spun the layoffs as like non-development, but the community is just as much a part of the development process, as your coders and your engineers. To not include them when they're the ones that are selling your game, and a lot of your marketing and media contact now are your Twitch streamers and YouTubers and such. They're the ones that are going through and providing them with the access to the game, that are inviting them to your press summits, that are going through and getting them streaming your game, other stuff that Blizzard doesn't do, but early access to games and other stuff that other titles and developers will do. That's all being run by your community team. They're the ones that are then putting together the metrics for, was this like, how popular was the season compared to others? Who do you think is like putting that information in spreadsheets and then bringing it over to the dev teams and such? That is that's community.
And you guys with Diablo are very lucky, because you have a really awesome community manager. Brandy is one of the best that I've ever worked with, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
And you still have her.
Yep.
And that's really cool. The problem with Blizzard ever since Titan, and ever since they went to this global team, is and this is all coming from Activision, is they've changed their point of view from being about the person to being about the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I mean that is, no longer was Blizzard reaching out to people like me, who's just doing these little things on the side for fun and because we're passionate about it. They instead targeted who can get me the most eyes on something. Who has the biggest numbers, because those are the people that I solely want to work with.
Yeah.
And then Activision started making metrics on how much money that department's worth, community or esports, based on those numbers. And that's how they started deciding where they needed to make the cuts. And that's what started sucking, is Activision Blizzard as a company, with Mike Morhaime gone, decided they no longer care about the person. They care about the quantity and the views. And you're going to see that a lot more moving forward on all facets of Blizzard.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And I mean, that's one of those ones that, you know, kind of as a content creator makes me have to go back and analyze what it is that I'm going through and doing, because if I want to stay relevant, I have to do something other than the podcast, because that's not, you know, you can't see how many downloads you're going through and getting on iTunes, and so it's not like really as quantifiable as a metric, and that's going to be one of those things that they're going to be looking for. You know, is I have that, you know, just as you were saying, that's one of the fears that I had going through and looking into all of this is, you know, when is it going to be, you know, for as you know, we're one of the more, if not the most popular Diablo podcast that's out there, but, you know.
And this is why I said you're really lucky to have Brandy.
Oh, well, you have no idea. I am fully aware of how, like, not just lucky, but purely blessed I am to have Brandy as the community manager.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Because she is still one of the old school community managers at Blizzard, in my opinion. And that's, you know, those are the type of people that I really like to work with. So, yeah. So it's just, and none of this, to be honest, is good or bad inherently. It's a change that we just have to adapt to.
It's business.
Or yeah, it's business. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, that's what it is. Whether we agree with the decision or whether it was made, you know, with greed, you know, or what have you, it is what it is.
Yep.
And, you know, that being said, there are still a lot of very passionate people at Blizzard that still believe in it as what they do, but like you're saying, it's not so much, and that's one of the ones that I've had difficulty like wrapping my head around, even just, you know, for the past 2 weeks, is that, you know, on the one side, I am so angry at Activision Blizzard and a little bit at, you know, like the executive leadership at Blizzard itself. But like, there are people that were going through and saying, well, I'm canceling my WoW subscription, I'm never playing, you know, one of your games or paying for one of your games ever again. Right. But at the same time, it's like
all of the other great people that work there.
Yeah, the developers that are working on your game, besides Heroes of the Storm, are still there. You know, still making those titles. It's still, and a lot of the developers that I've reached out to over the past 2 weeks, you know, they still believe, they still have that same passion, and it's one of those things that the layoffs affected them because, you know, the people that they've worked alongside for, you know, 5, 10, 15 years are now gone, and that always sucks when you lose those, you know, those close friendships, you know, or not losing the friendship, but seeing a friend suffer like that for losing their job. But they still believe in what it is that they're doing and what it is that they're working on.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I am still 100% behind the people that work there, that develop these games, that are involved in the community, that make all of those kind of decisions. It is the problem I have with Activision Blizzard just straight up comes from senior executives and leadership at Blizzard. And Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even mad at the people that work for Activision. It just straight up comes from the top.
Oh yeah.
And it's because they don't they don't see it the same way. They don't experience the same things that we're experiencing around this stuff, or what some of these other people that work for them do. They don't understand the value of what they do. And instead they try to make that value of what they do make sense to them, and you can't quantify that with numbers, and that's what they understand.
And I mean, because yeah, this is of course the same company that ran, you know, like Guitar Hero into the ground.
Right. Which,
You know?
I mean, honestly, Guitar Hero needed to go into the ground because I don't anymore. I had all these stupid plastic instruments,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm glad that died because I don't want them around anymore.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where it's like as soon as, you know, they got to the point where everybody had the guitars and they just wanted to buy the game without the promo package, they decided, oh no, this isn't worth it anymore. Shut it down.
All right.
What were you expecting was going to happen? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But so I'm gonna talk about something that I've seen some other people kind of comment about a little bit, and I'm gonna tell you a story. First, the comments I've been seeing from some people are how much Blizzard has changed, and how much Blizzard has changed since they were merged with Activision, and that Blizzard should go back to the way that they were, which, let's keep in mind, Blizzard has never owned themselves. They've always been owned by someone else. Even from the beginning of the company, they've always been owned by someone else. But we're talking about community and kind of focusing on that. And Blizzard was never about community like they are today or have been. That really did not come until, I want to say, it was after World of Warcraft came out.
Yeah,
I want to say 2005, 2006 is around the time that Blizzard really started to go, you know what, community is a good thing. As far as outpouring of community, like having third parties have communities, because while they had community managers, they were all about the forums just on Blizzard.
Yeah.
And Blizzard, the beginning of time with World of Warcraft, Blizzard did not want you to leave their website. They wanted everything there. They wanted to control the message. They wanted to control all of that. And I remember, because keep in mind, I was running a fan site for World of Warcraft in beta. And we never had any kind of contact with Blizzard because they would just ignore us. And we weren't a small fan site at the time. I worked for Stratix.com, and Stratix was one of the biggest MMO websites out there during that time frame, because we had Ultima Online was our big game, and that's where I started, was Ultima Online. And Ultima Online was behind EverQuest on, like, you know, the second biggest MMO at that time. And Origin was who worked with us and at Stratix, and we were like the official forums for Ultima Online. Like, they didn't even run their own forums; they just went through Stratix, and we did everything development-wise through Stratix. So we were a really big MMO site. So for World of Warcraft to come in and Blizzard did not work with us was really weird, because we had all these other sites with MMOs, and all the developers loved us, and Blizzard was like the complete opposite. Blizzard was like, I don't care at all about community. I want everything in-house at Blizzard. I want to control the message and all of that. So when people say, I want Blizzard to go back to the way that they were, I don't think they remember those times that Blizzard was kind of shut off completely from community up until about, yeah, I think Corny Rocks is right. Burning Crusade. Because when Burning Crusade came out, that's about the time that the Switch was made.
Because that was after the first BlizzCon.
Was it? No, I don't think so.
2005.
Oh yeah, wow. You're right.
I remember it distinctly, because that was when Wilma hit Florida, and I was sitting in the car on my laptop connected to the Wi-Fi of this little French bistro that for some reason still had power and an internet connection. the only place in like the greater part of Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
Watching,
you were 100% right. That was the first BlizzCon.
Yeah,
yep.
going and watching the announcement video of the Burning Crusade, because they didn't have the live stream of the stuff. You know, I was just having to go and read about it on Fansites.
Right. Right, because now I had my years mixed up. Because I remember going to E3 and they had Burning Crusade stuff there. And then that's kind of when I got to start talking to Blizzard, was at that point.
Mm-hmm.
When I started connecting to them a little bit more and they were more open. And then they started like this whole fan site thing where they used to have a page on their website. They would go to World of Warcraft fan sites, and WoW Stratix was one of them. And that was in 2006, 2007. So I started that connection in 2006. And that's really when everything kind of started. But before that, like, they had no interest in working with outside people at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they completely changed how they operated. They increased their community in those 13 years, and I'm afraid that they're going back, but I don't think it will go back to the way that it used to be.
Yeah,
I think social media still changed the game too much that you can't.
That was one of those, and like my thoughts on it is just, like for like fan sites, the expectations of the user is already a pretty high bar, and so it's not just something that I'm gonna throw some HTML together on like a GeoCities site or something like that to do a fan site. People want a build calculator, I remember back in the day when you couldn't call yourself like a legitimate fan site if you didn't have a blue tracker of some sort. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just like one of those things that's like the expectation of content and quality are just so high that it's hard for someone to come in with like a fan site at this stage in the game if you don't have some sort of corporate backing and money in order to go and fund some
right.
decent development and have regular content to keep people
right.
going through and coming back.
I mean, I think you can. There's definitely success stories out there most recently.
Mm-hmm.
I think Heroes Hearth does a fantastic job with what they did. In fact, I wish that I had their passion and team on what they did with Heroes of the Storm, and then they kind of got screwed over because of Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah.
But I remember someone was talking about remembering Thoughtbot. I remember when I was working for Stratix, we were going to try to compete with Thoughtbot and Wowhead before they were really big. We were starting to develop our own tracking tool, like data mining tool, and we were going to we were going to market it as not making any money off of it, and everything that we were doing that we were going to make money off of was going to go straight to Child's Play charity. And we had actually started working with Penny Arcade. We went to the Penny Arcade Expo in 2008 and was working with their people to make it happen. And then 4 months later, I quit Stratix, and that whole idea ended.
Womp womp.
Yep. So that was fun.
Yeah.
But running fans. Oh, so the last thing I wanted to say about fan sites, though, and how this kind of affects is we talked a lot about passion. And we talked a lot about how this is this isn't going to make money for you. It's you have this cycle and all of this stuff. And where was I going with this? I completely lost my train of thought all of a sudden. It's really about the amount of time that you have to put into it, because if you're doing this out of passion, not making any money, well, guess what? You have a full-time job. You've got to put food on the table, put a roof over your head. And a lot of us are growing older. Some of us have kids and families we have to take care of. and it's just, you know, it's not a minimal amount of work that to keep things up and running. It's a lot of work. You've got to have people that understand the behind the scenes stuff, like the technical stuff. You know, luckily that's my strong point.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got to have people that understand content, and that's not my strong point.
Not mine either.
Right. And it takes me hours and hours to put out just a minor article, just because of how long it takes me to write. And I know that a lot of other people are kind of like that too, but then you have people that can put out stuff really quickly. Like, I know Robert Wing was really good at just cranking stuff out left and right.
On demand.
On demand.
Yeah. I know
those
that
people are hard to find.
Like, at the time, like, he wasn't even really all that big into Diablo, but there would be like some news stories that would come out. No one else could go through and grab it, and, you know, like, Robert he just went through, oh yeah, I got it, and you have you know, more than just hey, check out this. He actually would read it and then, like, regurgitate points from it without really understanding what it was that he was writing about, but he could do it.
Right. And there's a reason why he went on to work for Blizzard.
Yeah.
Because that's a talent that not a lot of people have.
No. I sure as hell don't.
Right.
I'll open up the you know, like the WordPress or the Word document or something like that, type out an outline, and then walk away for 2 hours.
So when you think about that, though, and then think about corporations that have fan sites like Curse that are paying people for this, and then think about how much you're really getting paid for that. Because you said even with the stuff you were doing, it was under minimum wage, basically.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's no money in this.
No.
So that's when it said it comes down to passion. And if you as a company are killing that passion and killing that community, the ripple effect is going to be felt across the community.
Oh yeah, because then, like, when you have these places like Diablo Fans or you know, Ink Gamers or any of the other ones that they're owned by other entities and such,
right?
If they're just going to go through and, like, you know, make a business decision, you know, the people that might be, you know, running it, creating the content and such will have passion. If that ripple effect hits them, and so the amount of content, you know, kind of begins to dry up, then the business is just going to go through and look, well, okay, we're going to shutter it and move on elsewhere. You know? That's one of those things that's like, we have really no idea what the actual future of, like, Diablo Fans is, because the website's being put into an archive mode. And it's not actually being, like, closed, so they're still going to retain it. You know, the forums, the database, all that stuff. It's still going to be there that you can go to. You can look up all the builds. You just can't create new ones. Because as we were talking about earlier in the show, this could be one of the potentially, like, kind of like a breaking years for Diablo, where, you know, they you know, Nevilist said back in December, we will learn more about these multiple Diablo projects this year. You know, and with you know, some of those, you know, unconfirmed sources like the Kotaku article and such that, you know, made it seem as if we were this close to the Diablo 4 announcement at this last BlizzCon, you know, leads some credence that we might actually get that Diablo 4 announcement at, you know, at now this BlizzCon.
In that article that Kotaku put out, I think that was one of the most spot-on articles I've ever read. Oh
yeah, I mean, that was almost every single rumor or thing that I have heard or picked up or had hinted at over, like, the last couple of years were all confirmed in that article. Like, talking 100%. Like, there was not a single thing that had not been addressed within that article. And so that was just one of those ones that was like, that lined up way too well to be inaccurate, you know?
Yeah.
So so some of the other things that I might not have heard, you know, like rumors about and such, like the Dark Souls game or such, like, because that was one I never heard rumors that it was actually in development, but just people talking about, wouldn't it be cool if, You know, that I, since everything else matches up, I'm more likely to believe those other things.
Right, and the Dark Souls thing I had even sort of heard about. Not to that degree, but probably to the degree that the art direction that they were going with.
Yeah. I mean, that does kind of match up because, you know, there was the art director specifically that they had looked for, like, all the way back in, like, what was that, 2015?
Yep.
Was talking about a third-person over-the-shoulder perspective.
Yep.
You know, which, you know, that all comes together. And then, of course, the person that they hired, Harrison, I think his name was. Let me look it up real quick. Or was it Julian? I can't remember. I can't remember which one it was that they hired for that particular position, because now that they have like another creative director, there was like art director and the creative director, and now there's another creative director, and you know, we don't even know what team that they're working on or what project it is that they're going through and working for. But I remember there was one of the people that they had, one of the art or creative directors that they had hired, like their LinkedIn account like specifically touted them as, you know, a MMO developer,
right?
And then they're going through and, you know, joining the Diablo team,
right? So let's, you know how I had some comments earlier, like I had this whole spiel earlier about Titan, and how it failed, and how what about, I mean, seriously though, what about like when you talk about that Kotaku article and what happened with D3, even though D3 was a huge success, money wise, you know, they didn't have a lot of faith in it from the executive standpoint, and how much time and money went into what Diablo 4, Diablo Next, or whatever was going to be, that Hades project, before they shut it down and decided on something different. You know, that's another, like, what other things were happening at Blizzard behind the scenes that we don't know about in the last, you know, along with Titan. Like, it's probably more than just Titan. It's probably at some point, it's like, we're not getting our games out correctly, and there is something wrong in our pipeline. That's going to eventually kill our financials.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those things I talked about. I think it was like a GDC conference a couple of years ago, that they actually had a list of a bunch of titles that had been killed in development before they were ever released. And it was like 7 or 8 titles that they had went through and they had worked on. And so they actually, I think there was some other comments that they had made, that they don't actually have all of that good of a record of you know, development to release, you know, within the new projects that they continue to go through and spin up.
Right, and think of how much money they've wasted because of that.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they work, where it's like, okay, we're just gonna put everybody on this and see what happens. And I wonder if some of that happened after Alan Adam left.
Yeah.
Because maybe he was the glue to make that happen, because he left. Did he leave before World of Warcraft finally released, or was it shortly after? I know he was like the lead.
Yeah, and I believe, I don't remember whether it was that he left the company or he stepped down from being the lead developer before release.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact timeline, but if you look at that and you think about the games that they put out since, I mean, World of Warcraft was always doing stuff. They already had at that point Diablo 3 in production, but think of the problems that they had with Diablo 3 coming up to release.
Yeah.
Right? StarCraft 2 they already had at that point in production. Not in production, but, you know, in development.
Yeah.
So then you look at their other games that they came out with, and you had Hearthstone, which was basically an incubation project. Heroes of the Storm, which was basically an incubation project.
Yeah.
And then you had Overwatch, which came from the ashes of the remains of Titan. Blizzard's track record for huge games, like getting them out the door, has not been successful since World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It's not been hugely successful.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about all of the money that they spent in development.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that Alan Adham coming back and creating these incubation projects and looking at mobile as a possibility, or just maybe following what Hearthstone did, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And making Blizzard more efficient makes a lot of sense. But on the flip side of that, you would think that the layoffs would have then affected their build pipeline, the development pipeline, and making that more effective. And that's not what happened. In fact, they're looking at increasing that.
Yeah, there's like,
so
I think it's, they have, you know, what was it, close to 140 job postings on the careers site as of last week. And it's like some of the most that they've ever had. You know, in forever. That they're continuing to actively go through and hire more developers.
Right.
And then just to address something that Courtney Rocks is going through and saying here in chat, I'm sad that we never got more expansions or anything for Diablo 3. Reaper of Souls was a positive game change for D3. Sadly, not money-wise. But according to take the Kotaku article at face value, that apparently the decision to axe, there was plans to make another expansion after Reaper of Souls. But
the decision was before it even came out.
Yeah, before Reaper even launched, the decision to axe it was made. That they felt that the damage to the IP, you know, from the negative publicity of a lot of the struggles that the original D3 had at the beginning, that they had lost faith in the title, and just that they felt that the best step forward was to move on to the next iteration of the franchise.
Which I think might have been the right call at the time. But in hindsight, probably wasn't the correct call.
With, you know, that's one of those things that for a regular company, it probably might have been, but for Blizzard's development pace, not really.
I was seeing it more as the project that was going to follow up Diablo 3 didn't make it.
Yeah.
And they're working on the next one after that.
Yeah.
So
but yeah, I mean, it is one of those ones where it's like, but it's the same exact story of Diablo 3 itself. And you know, there were a few iterations of Diablo 3 before we got the final one that was released. And then, you know, a couple more iterations of Diablo 3 before we got Reaper of Souls. But, you know, even Blizzard North, that they scrapped their original Diablo 3 project, you know, before then that project, before Blizzard North themselves closed down, were, you know, subsumed by Blizzard proper, and then that project was scrapped and then restarted. You know, and so we're going into, like, you know, 2006, 2007, the game had been already in development for like 5 years and was on its third iteration.
Yeah, that's... Oh, boy. That's the life of... But that's the life of Blizzard, right?
Yeah.
That is one of the things that Blizzard is known for, is when they put out a game, it's going to be pretty damn good.
Oh, yeah. Their betas are better than a lot of other companies' releases.
Right. And I feel like this BlizzCon, a lot of that faith in that with Blizzard was kind of killed off because of how they decided to reveal their next Diablo game.
Yeah.
So,
because we, you know, taking like the objective stance, myself as a content creator, I know that this is not the next, like, iteration in the Diablo series proper, and that this is a separate project that is not in any way, shape, or form taking resources away from the development of Diablo Next, Diablo 4. But, you know, that you have a really hard time selling that to your average Joe. You know, the person that checks the, you know, our Diablo once every other week or something like that, and then they see that the next game is a mobile game, and they're like, I'm not playing that. I'm not playing a game on my phone. Like, you know.
Right. And to be honest, like, the best way to probably play Diablo Immortal won't be on your phone. It'll be on a tablet.
Yeah.
So. Speaking of which, did you see the video I posted of that kid playing Fortnite on the tablet?
Dear God. That is the future.
I mean, seriously, that kid was killing pro players that were playing on a console with a tablet. And this is why I'm saying Diablo Immortal, we had it all wrong with Diablo Immortal.
Yep.
Oh, man. Kids are going to eat that up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, that's really who you want to market to anyway, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. A couple weeks ago on Riker's stream, he was talking about Diablo Immortal, and the poll that he had in the stream from his viewership was mostly in favor of wanting to see him cover content in the game, because they wanted to see it in action before they jumped in and paid for it. So they wanted him to go through and cover it and actually see. So there definitely is still like interest there in it, and that a lot of people are, at least they might have a negative opinion of it now. They are at least reserved to, I'll give it a chance.
I 100% believe that Diablo Immortal is something that people wouldn't have been as whiny about if they had known up front that there was a PC game also coming.
Oh yeah.
Like imagine if Nintendo had put out today, they announced the next Pokemon next gen game, right? Like we already have Pokemon Go, but let's just pretend Pokemon Go didn't exist or anything like that. Let's just pretend that for a minute. And let's say Nintendo Direct, we're going to do a Pokemon thing. And everybody's like, oh man, Pokemon 7th generation or whatever, 8th generation. I don't remember what generation they're on. I don't play Pokemon. Let's imagine they're all excited and they're like, all right, we're going to get on. And then they're like, here's Pokemon Mobile. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
That's exactly what would have happened, and people would have been pissed, and people would have thrown a fit. They didn't get the Pokemon Next Generation game they wanted. Why are they putting out this stupid mobile game and all this stuff? And let's say just it was Pokemon Go without knowing how successful Pokemon Go was.
Yeah.
And then they came out with it, and then imagine how successul Pokemon Go was.
Yeah, because that was one of those things. Because Pokemon Go is just announced as an extra thing.
Right.
They had other stuff going through and going on development. It was like, oh hey, go check this out while we work on the next iteration, of the game, which is basically what Blizzard's saying, but they're not saying it in the way that they need to say it. They're being as obtuse about it as they possibly can, when they just need to go out and say, stop saying multiple teams working on multiple Diablo projects. Right. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah, we're making Diablo 4. Just say it.
Just say it.
Just say it. All Blizzard, I'm 100% telling you, all of your problems in the Diablo community will go away if you just say, we're working on Diablo 4.
Okay, another example of this. Let's go back to the Nintendo Pokemon example.
Yeah.
Nintendo announced Pokemon Let's Go for the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
And came out with it. Around the same time, they said, this isn't the next iteration of the Pokemon generation. This isn't the next step in your game that you want to see. We will be announcing that in soon. We will be announcing the next generation Pokemon game.
Yeah.
And they came out and said that Pokemon Let's Go was a huge success, and people knew they're still going to get the game that they wanted because Nintendo was up front and told them that. And didn't skirt around the issue at all.
And I want to say that this, again, like you were saying before, I want to say that this still has roots going back to like Titan and StarCraft Ghost. They're afraid of getting burned. They don't want so yeah, even though it's like almost a guarantee that it's gonna happen. The project or iteration of Diablo 4 that they're working on right now might not be what gets launched. but you're going to put out Diablo 4 at some point. Just say you're working on it.
Right. Yep. Just say it. Just put out a title screen of Diablo 4.
Bethesda did it.
Bethesda did it.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I feel like I keep repeating myself on all of this though, but
Welcome to my show for the last 3 months.
at least you got someone on here and you're not just talking to yourself.
Yeah. No, thankfully I've had Dread Scythe helping me out. We had Riker on.
I've been meaning to go back and watch that.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But that's one of those ones where it's just like it almost felt like just like a continuation of a conversation, because we do we talk about like the theories and stuff like that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so it's just but now let's just, instead of doing it in DMs, let's do it on stream.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask your chat room just real quick. I know the people listening on the podcast are gonna be like, "Oh, I don't get it. Why not? Why are you not including me?" I just want to ask you guys what you think about the fan site talk and the community talk that we've been having. We can move on and talk about other stuff. I just wanted to see how they responded to that.
Yeah. We did get some responses while we were going through and talking about it in the chat itself. Yeah.
I've always been kind of curious if people like hearing some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
On doing this kind of stuff or not.
Yeah, because I mean that was one of those ones where I had I saw even some like big name community members like going through and talking about, well, how much would it cost to buy Diablo Fans? Like, are you kidding? Just like there's a lot of expectations, but that also now goes back to like my conversation that I was having with Riker, where before the show, we actually started the show a little bit late because we got into a really in-depth conversation about movie theaters. Because I was just going through and talking about how like during the show and such, I was getting texts about stuff that was happening at work, and as soon as the show was over, I had to leave and go back to work.
Right.
That it was just like,
wow,
he didn't understand like how like movies just play. And it was like it's like they're all digital, they get delivered on a hard drive and everything. It's like it's basically played on a giant media player and such. And it was just like, oh wow, I never really thought about that. Like the things that you just walk into a theater, buy some popcorn, and watch a movie, you don't actually understand what goes into running it.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I suspect most fans go to a fan site for a build. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So our most popular articles, and I've talked about this to our team a lot in the past. Most of our most popular articles are usually information that can be found with doing a Google search.
In like years old at this point.
Right. Like they're still getting hits because people are looking for that information and hardly anybody else has it. And the funny thing is, and this is why I find Diablo so interesting, Hearthstone used to be our biggest website, and it's partly because we launched our Hearthstone website along with the Hearthstone announcement almost.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we started it, just a few months maybe after the announcement, and we were one of the first ones to get beta. We were one of the first ones to get beta keys to give out to people. And our Hearthstone site was our biggest website, and our Diablo website was probably our smallest website. And it's just because a lot of people didn't go Diablo stuff. We don't have like stuff there for builds. We don't have some of those tools that you probably want in a fan site.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly had news and a handful of articles. Over time, that has switched a little bit. Hearthstone is still our second biggest site, but it got overtaken by Diablo. Diablo right now is our biggest website. And I think part of that is because no one else bothered really to make Diablo websites other than a handful of places. And the articles that we've put out over time, like we might put out something about Kanai's Cube, we might put out something about the dungeons and the set or the pieces that you get from that and where to find the dungeons. We put out stuff about primal ancients. That's a thing, right?
Yes.
Trying to remember Diablo. Sorry.
That is correct.
Primal ancients, and stuff like that. And it's people that people are searching for. And since there's not a lot of stuff out there, we end up showing up pretty high in the search rankings, and that's where most of our traffic comes from.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting thing, that even though like Diablo is like not as high up right now as some of the other franchises at Blizzard, it's worked to our advantage. So it's just a little bit of information.
Yeah. Is just again, that's one of those things that will forever be interesting. Like when your top performing article month after month is something that was like published
like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is like one of those things, because it's like also it's like the information is especially for like Kanai's Cube is still relevant today. Like none of that has changed.
Right.
They've added to it, but none of it has changed.
Yep.
And so there's really no point in like going through and like republishing it, and so it's just something that sits there in the search results.
Yep. And then, while we push out news and stuff, that's how you get some views on your site, but it's also important for social media as well. That doesn't come anywhere close to the amount of traffic that you get over time on articles like that. But still enough to keep you relevant, because if you don't have a website that looks like it's been recently updated, then you don't gain people that are talking about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the biggest problems. And the one thing that I was always like very when I was doing more work on the Diablo side of things, jealous of the Hearthstone page, is that you actually had people that commented on your articles.
Yeah, and this is why I love doing podcasts and watching streams here, is because you actually have people interacting with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times when you're writing articles, you're like, is anybody even reading this?
Yeah, does anybody even care? It's like we're not getting any comments or anything like that. And you have like the one person that goes through and is like, oh, that's cool. Like, oh, thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go in and put a comment on an article every once in a while, I don't think people understand like how good that makes you feel.
Oh yeah, as like it's like one of those big things. Like as a content creator, especially when you're doing it just out of passion, it makes you I like doing the podcast because I love the game and such, but to know that it had some impact on someone else. Like there's like two stories that I still to this day remember, that we had one person whose friends played Diablo, but he didn't. But he started listening to our podcast, and after a month of our podcast, finally dived in and bought Diablo 3 and absolutely loved the game. But he was listening to it was 5 episodes of our show before he went and started actually playing the game. And then we have another listener that we actually had on the show immediately after BlizzCon, who has been listening to our show but hasn't played Diablo in almost 3 years, but still listens to every episode.
Yeah.
A hardcore Path of Exile player, but just loves the content that we go through and put out.
Yeah. I have a funny story regarding comments today, actually from yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. So, as I said earlier, I do a podcast for Hearthstone called Well Met. And I was at work yesterday, and I was walking up to a conference room for a meeting that I had to give a presentation in for. And we're in a really big building. Like, you have to walk forever through this building. And so I'm walking through there, and I'm walking up to the conference room, and I have to pass like 3 other doors to other conference rooms in a small hallway. And a meeting in one of those conference rooms was getting out. And, so people are walking out that door. I'm walking down. I almost run into a guy that's walking out the door. No big deal, whatever. And just, oh, sorry. And I move on. He's walking behind me. And I'm walking to my conference room. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, I got a question for you. And this is a guy I've never met before because I work for a pretty big company. And I'm like, oh, what? What's up? And he goes, are you J.R. Cook? I'm like, yeah. Which isn't unusual in and of itself, because this is around the area that I work in anyway. And I have a lot of projects that I work with people that have heard from me on projects that I've done. And that happens sometimes. And then I get to meet some people that, have heard about my work there. But instead, he goes, oh man, I listen to your podcast and I'm a big fan. And this is kind of like meeting a celebrity. I didn't know you were working here. I'm just like, how do I respond to this? That was really kind of awkward.
Yeah.
I mean, it was cool, but it was just one of those things I was not expecting at work.
No, I have to say I've only had that experience at BlizzCon.
Right.
Which is like an area that you would expect it to happen, but not at the company that you work at or just in your everyday life.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta ask Longshot how old he is because he said who did he ask who shot JR, and that is one of those questions that growing up I got so tired of hearing of. I hated that, and I don't hear it very often anymore, and it's usually from old people. So thanks.
Was that Dallas?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I'm picking up on the reference.
Yeah. But anyway, no, he didn't ask who shot JR.
Watson,
he was asking about the show.
Watson, Longshot. No, we don't talk about those times anymore. we don't talk about that.
All right. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting. I just thought that was funny the other day. I just wanted to share that story because, of all the places, like I've met people randomly before.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Disney World last year, and the guy didn't come up to me, but instead tweeted at me, "Hey, I think I just saw it at Eldorian at Disney World."
That is awesome.
And I hadn't tweeted or anything that I was at Disney World that day, so that was funny.
Awesome, just like awesome little things, just getting, that's everyday life, getting recognition for, the things that you take pride in, as we talk about,
right,
something that we do out of passion.
Right. And it's always fun to meet people that enjoy your work.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like what I'm doing is not important, but moments like that make me feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah. And just looking at the episode time as well as the actual time, and I think we'll probably go through and begin to wind it down here for tonight.
That's probably a good plan. I think my wife is waiting for me to go watch Masked Singer.
I won't knock it. I just don't watch TV at all. I still have not watched the second season of Westworld. Though I love that show so much, and I need to get around to doing it. I just need time.
I didn't like the second season. It was okay. It's not as good as the first season.
It's one of those ones that would be kind of hard, to live up to that.
Right.
Not every show can be Ash versus Evil Dead. Where it just keeps getting better and better with every season until they cancel it.
Yeah, we always watch. So we watch Masked Singer just because it was out of curiosity, and then we kind of got hooked on it.
Yeah.
But we don't watch it live because we like to fast forward through all the BS and just watch them sing, and then try to guess who they are.
Yeah.
So we end up watching maybe a third of the show that way. Makes it a lot more bearable.
It's the good third, right?
Right.
Yeah. But with that, even though I know this is going to create one of those issues where I'm going to have an episode that half of it is going to be community feedback and items of the week, but you know, I will be getting to that on the next episode. Maybe I should do that. You know, can kind of get back into the weekly format by having an episode of news and then an episode of the community feedback. We'll see. But yeah, if you have any comments, you know, about the show or the topics that we talked about here, if you have epic loot, you know, primals and stuff, I know I've got a couple items of the week waiting to go through and be shown. Go ahead and send them in westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. Again, you can send in, you know, any comments that you have about the show, about the maybe topics that you'd like to see, or input, or your thoughts on things that have happened, you know, going around with the Diablo community, Blizzard in general. What your take is on like fan sites. You know, do you still go to fan sites, you know, and such? Again, that's westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. You can also follow the show at the WM Workshop on Twitter. And of course, we go through and I do the live stream here every other Wednesday night at twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Come, you know, check it out, hang out. If you like what I do here on the show, please feel free to go ahead and hit that follow button, so that way you can be notified when we go live with the live recordings, because I do record all the episodes live, to go and check it out. Be part of the chat, be part of the community. And if you want to go through and support the show or support the BlizzPro network in general, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. That goes back to cover, you know, as we talk about in the show, the hosting costs in order to keep all of these things going, not just for the Westmarch Workshop, you know, but for Well Met and the rest of the BlizzPro network of websites as well, which you can find a lot of the stuff that we talk about in more over at diablo.blizzpro.com. We are even in game. We are the BlizzPro clan. And if you are already in a clan, you can always join the Westmarch Workshop community. Just go ahead and do a search for that. And then you can also join us on discord.gg/BlizzPro. You can follow me individually. I am at Neinball Gamer on Twitter. I stream occasionally at twitch.tv/Neinball. But Longshot wouldn't know that because he's never actually there to watch any of my streams. And JR, where can people go through and find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter over at Eldorian. That's the best place to get a hold of me.
Mm-hmm. And then any last minute plugs? Well Met, anything like that?
If you're interested in Hearthstone stuff, check out Well Met Podcast. We're over on hearthstone.blizzpro.com. You'll find us over there. You'll also find us on Twitter at Well Met Podcast. Also, make sure you give a follow to at BlizzPro. Check out BlizzPro.com, which I'm sure you do if you're listening to the show anyway. Mm-hmm. And remember, if you see an article and you got like 2 seconds, leave a comment. It'll make a content creator happy.
You have no idea. And with that, this episode draws to a close. You know, thank you everybody for going through and joining us. Next episode is going to go through and be recorded on March 13th. And I really, really hope that we'll be talking about the PTR at that point, because that would be right around the time where, if they're going off of the 2 months, should be right around then. So with that, again, good night everyone, and thanks for joining us.